Hi, welcome to week 9 of my wrap-up for grad school, my second semester. I'm a Master of Forestry student at Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. So welcome to snowy Flagstaff. We got some more snow. I'm going over 3 classes that I take each week: forest insects, ecological economics, and independent study. So this week in insects, we looked at pollinators. Why, when you look out at the world, do you see so many different kinds of flowers? It is a morphology to attract insects. We looked at beetles as a pollinator. They're interested in light-colored, kind of dull-toned flowers, big ones. They're really interested in a food source. So the flowers that use beetles for their pollinator produce a lot more pollen than they do nectar. One of the things that the flowers do is thermogenic property, and that means that the flower makes their little space warmer, so when the beetle comes in, it's a nice snuggly area to be there. The beetles can come in the evening and be in this little honeymoon suite and roll around in all the pollen, and then in the morning they go and pollinate another flower. And they also, beetles are looking for a yeasty, fruity smell. And yeah, so that's it on the beetles. They don't look for fancy patterns on their flowers. Then their flies, those are also a pollinator. They are attracted to stinky flowers. So there's a corpse flower which smells like rotting flesh, and the fly is a pollinator for that. Actually, the corpse flower is the largest flower in the world. And then the ginkgo trees, they also use flies. The female ginkgo tree is really very stinky, and so it's attracting a fly. We looked then at bees and wasps. Those are the most important pollinators. Bees and wasps, they have ultraviolet vision, so the flowers that are attracting them have a variety of patterns, and they are thought to be like leading the pollinator into the nectar spot. So they have a very distinct bullseye that it's bringing the bee or the wasp into. Those prefer blue and yellow flowers, very sweet smelling, because those pollinators are looking for nectar. Particularly in the morning, that's a good time to go out and see these pollinators because they're desperate for the sugar that's in the nectar, and so they're out pollinating really early at that point to get full. There's also proteins and nutrients in the nectar for them, not just the sugars. Oh, and sometimes the flower will mimic that it's a female insect or smell, and the males will come in and they'll look all around for the ladies and get pollen all over themselves, and then they don't find the ladies and they go to the next flower that smells like a lady. So that's one way to trick them. One thing that the bees do in opposite trickery is that they can climb around to the back side of the flower and bite a little hole, and all the nectar will come out. So those are not sustaining mutualistic relationships. And we then looked at, and also sometimes those types of flowers have a little landing pad for where the bees can land. We looked at butterflies and moths as pollinators. The butterflies, of course, are out in the daytime. They also are looking for a broad flower like the beetles, but they like really bright ones. They are looking for nectar, and so take like the milkweed, which is a butterfly pollinated plant. Its pollen is very sticky, and that is because it needs a pollinator heavy enough to be able to take that pollen when it sticks under their legs and fly it off to another flower. And that way the milkweed is helping ensure that it is only being pollinated by insects that have gotten the same pollen, because like for instance, if you were a specialist and a pollinator brought you the wrong type of pollen, then it could clog up your system. That is one reason to be a specialist, so that when the insect comes to your flower, you know that it's only going to other flowers of your same species. and moths, they come out in the nighttime, so they don't have really good eyesight, but they use their smell really well, so the flowers that are looking for pollination by moths smell really sweet and strong. They're also light colored because that way the moths can see them at night. So when you go outside and you see a flower, or I guess you could do it at your florist, you can say to yourself, what is the smell? Is it strong? What kind of pattern is there? And what is the shape of the flower? And then you can think about what kind of pollinators it is trying to attract. This is another thing, well, you can think about it like a business, that the flower is a business and is trying to attract customers. And which customers is it appealing to? Okay, so 2 more things quickly about the insects from this week is bumblebees. They land on the flower, and the flower responds to the vibrations and the sound of the bumblebee, and then it like lets loose with its nectar. That it is responding to this customer request of a special order. It doesn't just always have the nectar out at the top. The other thing that is pretty cool is that some flowers actually put caffeine in their nectar. So, you know, they're trying to get the little insects to constantly want to come back and dip into the caffeine. It is facilitating the pollination. It works better on social species like bees and wasps. All right, so the word for the day, for the week, for the insects class is thermogenic. Thermogenic. T-H-E-R-O-M-O-G-E-N-I-C. Plants' ability to raise their temperature compared to the surrounding temperature. For flowers, that makes it warmer for pollinators, but also it means that the flower's scent can travel further away to attract those pollinators. Think about when you're in the kitchen and you're cooking food, it smells a lot better and stronger and further away when it's warm. Right, ecological economics. We looked at still on interconnectedness. So we're looking at spatial scales in terms of like from your backyard all the way to transglobal. Also considering the temporal scales because there are fast and slow moving factors that affect systems. And one of the cool things that I learned was not only can we now track our water footprint, but we can track our virtual water footprint. So that means that you can find out from any product, well, not from any, but from products that you purchase, how much virtual water was required to produce that product. We looked at a global map, and there's this massive, biggest line on there leaving Arizona on the virtual water footprint, which of course you think about Arizona full of a lot of water, right? Well, we produce most of the greens and vegetables, the type of vegetable in the winter. So we have this huge virtual footprint for exportation, which is obviously unsustainable. Excuse me, you can go to watercalculator.org and see what your water footprint is. One of the questions is, if that were on a website where you're purchasing something, would it change your purchase? So if you were on Amazon and it said your water footprint and virtual water footprint is 500, would you buy something that only had 100? So think about that. Let's see, then we looked at the Wulong Nature Reserve for giant pandas in terms of how the system's integration has such an impact. They developed this reserve for giant pandas. A lot of tourists started coming in. The locals in the area started using the surrounding reserve area for getting products to sell to the tourists, and the reserve for the pandas decreased and the land because of the land change use. So what they ended up doing was, by seeing that full circle of effects, but they call it spillovers or externalities. I have an issue with both of those words because they're obviously inherent part of the system. They're just ones that we don't generally recognize. But they did recognize those, so that is one of the reasons that London has the giant panda, and so that not as many people are coming over to China, the pressure is less over there, but also the Chinese government recognized that the people in that area by the reserve needed different skill sets, and so they addressed that part of it also. So we're looking for key factors and functionality thresholds. Then we looked at transboundary governance, which, for example, wildfires create smoke. That smoke, actually, the particles will make more lightning strikes hit the ground. So there were wildfires that were taking place in, South America, I believe, Mexico or South America, and the smoke was going up to Canada, and there the Canada recorded more lightning strikes hitting the ground because of the fires happening down in another part of the equator. So transglobal issues, that transboundary governance is really being taken on more by NGOs because it crosses all of the normal nationalities of governance. So the word for ecological economics is telecoupling, and that is one of the concepts that incorporates all these things I just talked about. It is socioeconomic and environmental interactions between human and natural systems. Telecoupling. All right. For my independent study, I took a little bit of a turn, and I'm super excited. So I am so interested in wilderness and public lands. So that is more what I'm focusing on now instead of the aspect of food security, because I couldn't incorporate it with these other two things. And I'm going to be looking at the mountains of central Idaho, which I love. And my desire is to connect all these actors with the impacts and the carrying capacity of the wilderness area there and the national forest. So most of the actors involved are interested in getting more and more and more people because their interest is economics, but we have a disconnect between getting more people and what it's doing to the landscape. And that's what I'm interested in. And that led me to discuss with my professor the concept of common pool resources, which is when some people, people take from a resource and then nobody is really feeling the pinch of it happening. Take, for example, somebody fixed dinner and nobody wants to do the dishes. So I'm trying to figure out what that impact, how to find a process that shows the indicators and how to do that before the system begins to have a tipping point or hitting that threshold. We talked about Everest and the trash there, but my professor said there was an economic incentive to start picking up the trash. So I would like to see if I can find one for that in Idaho so that the system itself, the land, the health of the wilderness and the forest are not degraded so badly before we actually make a change and transition. All right, so the word for independent study is wilderness. When you look it up, just as a word itself, it says that it is uncultivated, inhospitable, and uninhabited. So if we manage these wildernesses for uninhabited space, we are definitely have a missing link because our wildernesses attract a lot of people. Ecotourism is based in going in there, and we need to begin to do a better job of considering wilderness with inhabitants in it and how then to manage so that we incorporate the human interaction and the ecological necessities. Okay, I hope you're having a great day, great week, and I'll see you later. Ciao, ciao, ciao.